football clubs.
Southampton have been playing at St Mary's for the last 20 years, as they had become too big for the Dell. But are they a big football club?
Subscribe now to see how they compare with other big football clubs.
Southampton have not won the number of trophies to compete with any of the biggest clubs, and their overall attendance since they've been playing in the league also leaves them way behind. If we plot their success and popularity on a graph, we can see that they're at the bottom end of the line connecting the biggest clubs on the apparent basis of size. But is this accurate? We pulled off the biggest cup shock. Southampton have won one FA Cup, but no other major honours. They have won divisional championships and have played European football, but they have not picked up any major trophies abroad. The Dell was a fortress, but we got too big. Southampton had fairly stable crowds for the first 20 years of their league existence. The mostly second division side managed to get reasonable figures, but they were a fair way off the top flight average. They peaked during a strong season at the end of the 20s, but with low table finishes during the 30s, numbers had fallen somewhat. Crowd numbers would peak at the end of the 40s, with Southampton pushing for promotion. But this fell away along with the club's decline in form. By the mid-50s, numbers were seriously low, as they found themselves in the third division, but promotion to the second division helped to improve matters. But it was when Southampton were promoted that figures recovered, and in the mid-60s, Southampton's crowds were not far off the top-flight average for a season. But the gap between them and the average would go back to normal even when in the top flight. Relegation slightly widened the gap apart from the season in which they won the FA Cup. But better was to come. Southampton's impressive finishes in the first division at the start of the 80s narrowed the gap and would bring them close to the top flight average. As finishes were not strong moving into the late 80s, the gap widened once again. In the 90s, the Dell had been converted into an all-seater stadium, so crowds were limited to 16,000, and attendances flatlined whilst other clubs in the division were growing their stadia. By the turn of the millennium, it was clear that a new stadium was needed, and the building of St Mary's nearly doubled average attendances, and the club were getting close to top-flight averages until relegation. Time spent in the second and even third division sent numbers crushing down once more. But once back in the Premier League, Southampton have been getting close to the top flight average. The club may not be able to keep up with others who are increasing their capacities. We love playing Man U. Southampton's big day came in the 1976 FA Cup final against Manchester United. This was 6th place in the second division up against 3rd place in the third division. United had the earlier chances, but the Saints were hungry to lift the trophy, and Stokes won himself a car and put Southampton into the lead, with little time for United to react. It's all about Lutesenko. A best ever Southampton selection might include players who were part of their strong finishing sides in the 80s, defenders who managed to keep them up on a few occasions in their Premier League era, and strikers over different periods. Southampton's best ever player is undoubtedly top scorer Matt Le Tissier. Our rightful place is at the top. Southampton entered the Football League in 1920, when elected into the 3rd Division South. In their second season, they won that championship and would gain improving finishes until the mid-20s. Their rise would slow down and they had settled into a second division side. They did have a good finish at the end of the 20s, but during the 30s they would find themselves mostly in the bottom half of the table and came close to relegation on a few occasions heading in to the end of the decade. After the war, they experienced growth in league finishes, and they were one of the stronger sides in the second division in the late 40s. However, form would slip in the 50s, and they would finish lower and lower in that division until relegation back to the 3rd Division South in the mid-50s. The Saints spent some time struggling at this level, and they would remain there for the remainder of the 50s. In 1960, they won the 3rd Division, and the 60s would see the club improve most years. After coming close, Southampton finally gained promotion to the 1st Division by winning the 2nd Division in 1966, and would keep their place in the top flight for a good few seasons. After a few fluctuating finishes in the First Division, including one season playing in Europe, Southampton would spend the mid-70s in the Second Division. But this is when the magic happened. Southampton won their first major trophy, the FA Cup, in 1976. They remained in the Second Division for a couple more seasons and won the Second Division title to take them back into the First Division. Within a few seasons, their form had stabilised and had become a regular feature in the top flight in the 80s. Then in 1984, they obtained their highest finish as runners-up in the league. Over the seasons, they were not able to keep this up and would tend to finish around mid-table mostly. In the 90s, things got a little harder for Southampton, as they became known for escaping from relegation on a few occasions. But by this time, they had managed to stay in the top flight for the duration of both the 80s and the 90s. After top half finishes, they then started to struggle, and in 2005 they were finally relegated. Once in the Second Division, Southampton would not look like escaping anytime soon, and the club were eventually relegated into the Third Division. But after a couple of seasons they made it back to the Second Division and promptly won the Second Division title. The Saints would then remain in the Premier League for 10 seasons straight, one season finishing in 6th. But they would again be relegated and make it back to the top flight a season later. Southampton can be happy with their FA Cup win, but the club has won no other major honours. They haven't played enough European football to have won any European trophies. Southampton have struggled to keep up with the average attendance of top-flight teams. They have improved greatly over the years, but will need to keep building and filling their stadium to do so. We cannot say that Southampton have had a range of great matches, but they can certainly be proud of their giant-killing FA Cup final. Southampton have had a good range of players over their history, definitely of top-flight status, but there are only a couple who could get into other sides' best ever 11s. Southampton are a club who have spent a lot of time in the Second Division and have risen to become one of the top-flight regulars. Their fan base has been increasing over the years, but they simply do not have the success to stand alongside England's
big football clubs.
Do Southampton belong in the Premier League?
Please comment below. Like and subscribe to Big Football Clubs to watch videos as they're released each week.